What's up, guys? Episode 17. We are here with Eloh Project. He is another digital artist, so again, check out his work down below. The interview itself, we go through his artwork and his motivations, how he got started, his education, because I was super impressed just in terms of his overall, vocabulary, logic, just knowledge of, everything kind of going on. It's very similar to his thought process is very similar to almost like Kanye, which is like I mean that in the best way possible. I think Kanye is brilliant, and I think he's pretty like misunderstood, but just not Kanye, but his overall thought process is very circular and kind of explaining every aspect to get you to the point as he's kind of finding it himself, which was his own description. But my take is just that as he's explaining things, he kind of takes you through each different portion that also plays a factor to whatever his logic is or whatever he's explaining. And so I think there's a ton to be learned, a ton of just fun stuff, and I had an absolute blast with the guy. So check it out. Let me know what you guys think. Appreciate it. Have fun. Stay safe. Peace.
I guess do you want to just start with how you kind of got started in the space or art in general or
Yeah, well, let me actually find something out about you first, so I know kind of what direction we're coming from.
mm,
So I know you interviewed Stephen Lane,
mm.
um, and so did you link up with him through the crypto art space, the
Mm.
NFT space, or oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right. So that's the direction we're coming from.
Mm.
Okay, cool.
We could
All
I
right,
mean we could hit everything. It's
yeah,
really open.
yeah. Okay, well, let me answer that question from that perspective. In I guess it was 2016. I got started with Steemit. I I can't remember exactly how I got turned on to it, but basically I was like, oh, I spend a significant amount of time on social media. I use it kind of like a diary, sometimes like a trash can, actually.
Mm.
Um, just a way to pump out thoughts, and then it triggers people or it doesn't, and whatever. So sometimes it's been pretty valuable, social media in general, and then other times complete waste of time. So I found Steemit. Can't remember exactly how I came across it, and I was like, oh wow, sweet. So you can monetize your posts, and it was like this fresh take on social media. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to bring something unique to the space, and you have to figure out how to get everything going. You want your wallets, and it was a pretty complex at the time way of doing things. Like Steemit has its own ecosystem, and it's convoluted, and you have Steam Power and all this stuff. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Um, so I position myself there like, okay, I'm going to bring this visionary art concept to it, and because it wasn't being done right, there was all kinds of stuff, all kinds of fringe worthy topics, and pretty free speech oriented for the most part, but there wasn't much art. So I figured, okay, I'm gonna bring what I know, which is like this psychedelic, festival culture thing.
Mm.
I'll bring that and start introducing people to that. It's something fresh, and so I did reasonably well considering how many people were trying to make money there.
Mm.
Made a couple $1,000 maybe, um, but through that, is a lot of emphasis on the cryptocurrencies and the blockchain and all that. Through that, um, I started interacting and interfacing with several different thinkers, I guess, and thought leaders and stuff like that. So, I worked on a blockchain video game with, this dude that was building on EOS at the time, and that kind of didn't go anywhere. It was a lot of pie in the sky, but it was the advent of like novel ideas. I think it was a confluence of a bunch of people coming up with stuff in ways that you could use the blockchain in uh, for novelty's sake, I guess. So I linked up with Stella Bell and like Julia Ponsford and Yusemon and like several Vachimore, several of these characters that are now on Super Rare. And we were discussing in 2016, 2017, like how we could rarefy digital artwork. And so through that process, like the group of people, the group expanded, and introducing ourselves to these people and meeting these new people, and having conversations and brainstorming. And so anyway, there was that boom in 2017 with crypto, and I made some money from it. And I'm like, I can't see rarefied digital artwork going anywhere at this point. There's just not enough there. So basically, to summarize all that, I was at the forefront of like the brainstorming phase of what NFTs are now. And I couldn't get my head around how it would actually work, or that people would even be interested. So I took my gains, paid for my wedding at the time, and then I just stepped out. I stepped back into what I know, which is a visionary art, and interfacing with that culture, and doing my own thing, putting more spokes in the wheel, through logos and web design and all kinds of stuff, but using my weight to kind of pull people towards what I wanted to do more and more. So I was able to succeed in that, and over time increase my rates and bring more people toward what I wanted to do, and make those worlds kind of merge until I was able to, support myself and now support my family. So last year, I guess maybe in June, my friend Glass Crane, who Lane shares a space with, he reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, have you heard of Super Rare?" And I'm like, "I don't know." I'm like, "I think maybe, but it doesn't ring a bell." He's like, "Dude, you got to check it out, And so I went and had a look, and I was like, "Oh man," I'm like, "They did it."
Yeah.
They pulled it off. Somebody did it. And like, people are making money here. And I'm like, "This is great." So I dove in and hit the ground running, and I was doing very well, kind of right off the bat. And just about every piece that I put out would sell. And then I started creating animations of works that I had produced in the past, just to kind of carve out my space there. And so, yeah, that's basically how I came to it. Since then, a lot of large artists have come in and kind of sucked the air out of the room. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to just stay with what works, because it doesn't work anymore. So I've spent about the last 2 months or so, since Beeple had his kind of legendary $3.5 million drop. I'm like, this is not going to last at all. Like, what I'm doing, what everybody else is doing, it's just not, this is good because it will bring more collectors to the space, and work towards mass adoption and all that, but it's not good in the short term, right? So I had to kind of go back to the drawing board and figure out how I was going to stay afloat in this space. And I'm like, okay, so I was here at kind of the advent of this whole thing. I stepped away, just like whatever, I had just given up on it. I come back to it. It's the beginning of a boom, and then all of these dudes step in, and it's just, there's like no way to get eyes on your stuff. Scarcity of attention, scarcity of collectors, all that stuff. So I'm like, all right, well, I was there at the advent of this whole thing. So how do I now position myself to be at the advent of the next wave that's coming? So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is what do I do, not only to stay relevant, but to push the boundaries and what's possible with NFTs in general. So that's where my thinking's at right now.
Nice. So do you feel like it's a bubble?
Uh, no, it's not a bubble. It's like they're so the space is a set of lungs,
Mhm.
and what we just experienced is the capacity of what those lungs are capable, the oxygen that the lungs are capable of holding, right?
Mhm.
And then there's been an exhale recently, so it's it's an ebb and flow. It's not a bubble that's going to pop or anything, but I would say that if we continue on this trajectory of trying to gain mass adoption, that it will become that. Like when NFTs are used solely for financial gain, and um, they serve as like stock in an artist's brand,
Mhm.
like we're not utilizing the true potential of what digital assets can be,
Mhm.
right? It's just another money making
Yeah.
procedure, and it's a step down from kind of everything that the blockchain it has been developed for, right? Which is to revolutionize finance and peer-to-peer transactions, and to essentially liberate the individual. So it can be a bubble if we continue to have you know people coming into the space and dropping napkin drawings that took them 15 seconds,
Yeah.
and hundreds of thousands of dollars are being you know just blown on this stuff. Yeah, that's a bubble.
Mhm.
That's indicative of a bubble, but we don't it doesn't all have to go that direction, and I don't think it all will go that direction. There's going to be a fork of some sort. There will be people who go that direction. I probably will do that at some point too, but I don't have that kind of clout or that pull at this point, right?
Mhm.
So
Do you So do you think that it's possible that you're still so early on in terms of like the digital space that what feels like a bubble or, exhale, inhale, like your analogy was, do you think that that's possibly just mass adoption and it getting up to speed of where it could possibly baseline at?
yeah, I mean, so you look at trends with Bitcoin or Ether, and they explode.
Mhm.
Everybody gets rich, and then people are like, I don't have faith that it's going to go any further.
Mhm.
So they pull out, they take their gains, and then the market kind of drops back down to a new baseline, right?
Mhm.
But that is not necessarily $30,000. It's not even $20,000. It could drop, back down to 10.
Mhm.
There's nothing. There's going to be some resistance lines in there, but there's nothing to say that it won't.
Mhm.
Um, I think if it drops down to 10, now we're acculturated and accustomed to it being so high that if it drops down to 10, that's the buying point. Everybody's going to buy in, and so the trend is like upward, and just the general geopolitical environment and the state of finance and the bankruptcy of the United States and all this stuff, like digital currencies, because they're convenient and quick, they have a lot of application, and so they'll continue to expand and continue to grow. So
Mhm.
what we can look at, more likely than this being something that blows over and everybody loses in the end, is that you're just going to see more and more variety, things that have better and better application towards the issues that we're facing at any given moment, right?
Mhm.
um, so the blockchain itself is so innovative, and everybody that's going there, see, like, even now you're not like at the bleeding edge of this whole thing.
Mhm.
um, like 2000, you know 2009 was like the bleeding edge of it,
Yeah.
right? 2017 was like, you're still on the bleeding edge, because the bleeding edge, like, it didn't cut all the way through.
Mhm.
It was just still like people are trying to get their head around. But that expansion right there, I mean, from a 30,000-foot perspective, 2009, 2017
Mhm.
are cousins. This thing that's happening now is still part of that initial boom, that initial blast.
Yeah.
But it's kind of at the end of that initial period, and now we're moving towards mass adoption. And when you see mass adoption happen, there's going to be a ton of money and a ton of energy flowing to it. So you're going to see extraordinary variety in the types of solutions that are brought to the table. As far as NFTs go, like, we know they're great for video game assets, things like that. Obviously, for art, art itself may go the way of just being stock in any given artist. But some people are making a living totally and solely on NFTs.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that is sustainable. I think that you're going to have to eventually produce something in the real world that the NFTs represent. So I take that for granted. I think that some people are going to have a rude awakening in some way. But there's going to be kind of a ceiling as far as like just redoing this thing over and over again with art and tokenization. People are going to be moving towards experiences and metaverses, and they're going to want something, like the token itself is the contract, the ERC 721 contract, and the art together. That's what the token is. So you're like buying somebody's signature on that thing, and it's part of the distributed ledger, and everybody can see it, and they know where the ownership is. But still, it doesn't stop anybody from going to Google and downloading the image and calling that theirs anyway, right?
Yeah.
So that will become a reality at some point. People are going to realize, and there's a reason that some folks mock it, or they don't take it seriously, or whatever. There's a reason for that. So that may cap out at some point. It's my reasonably educated estimation that people are going to have to begin to think beyond just tokenizing artwork, producing things in the real world. What is your shtick? Like, what do you actually do that this artwork, to give this artwork value? What is the thing that you consistently produce beyond this space that shows me it's worthwhile to hold this token? So I think that's probably a natural progression. I don't think it's a bubble. I think it's just it's going to grow, and then it's going to have to shed its skin so that it can continue to grow.
Gotcha. So how, not to, I guess, give too many people your own ideas, but like, how do you, in terms of your own art, plan or have some thoughts in terms of like bringing stuff into the real world in addition to tokenization?
Well, so I have an art career that is established beyond the blockchain. So I have clients in a number of different arenas that sustain me. I haven't tokenized anything in 2 months because there's just so much chatter that it just feels like extra noise. And it feels like cringy, I guess, to tokenize and then put the thing on Twitter, and then shill it every single day, trying to get somebody to pay attention to it. It's part of the process, but I don't think that it should be. Like crafting, a way to get people to pay attention to you is it's like peacocking in a sense. There's a term for it called the boho dance. This author, Tom Wolfe, he was a critic and an art historian. He coined that term, the boho dance. And basically what it refers to is like the bohemian art scene. They shake their tail feather and try to attract the attention of the bougie aspects of culture. And only some of them succeeded, the ones that were able to consummate the marriage, right? Like the ones who were, like streetwise and like funky, but they could also like do the dance in high society, right? So they were like threatening, but like, you know, not too threatening. They were out there and freaky, but they still fit nicely with like the comfort of that upper class, right? So you're looking at kind of a replay of that era in crypto art, right? Everybody's trying to like, you know, put on their best suit and like, check me out. Like my art's like avant-garde, but I'm also like a good guy, you know, like, and I could teach you some stuff about the world, but I'm really interested in what you do too. You know, it's fake, and some people do it naturally, and it just comes to them, and they're really good at it. I have it's I don't want to say that they're fake. Like some people are just like that, right? Like they just have this knack for selling shit that people don't necessarily need. And I'm not like disparaging it or whatever. It's just the truth. I have a really hard time doing that. I've built my career with less followers, less clients, and less fans, so to speak. And I focused more on solid relationships, and developing long-lasting, golden friendships, relationships that where people will come to me because we have like a mutual loyalty to each other, right? And so you know, that's just the other way to go. You can build a fan base, you can shake your tail feather, you can do all this stuff. I mean, essentially art in and of itself is like peacocking, like look at how good I am, you know. And some people have different things that they want to accomplish with it. You know, some people want to change the world or influence society, or, you know, bring visions back from psychedelic space and be teachers and gurus. And I think artists are generally too big for their britches, you know, especially when they're become, you know, there are so many of them, right? Like it becomes an identity. And so I try to rebel against my tendencies to fixate upon a specific way of doing things. I want to be agile. I generally exist in a perpetual shakeup of stability, and so I don't like that necessarily, but I'm comfortable with it. And so I've got to keep moving in you know, the people that I appreciate and appreciate me are kind of there to make sure that I'm able to continue to do what I do. So that, you know, it's a podcast, so it's long form. That's kind of my answer to that is I don't really, I mean, I have a series of things that I'm doing, but they're things that I think are really cool, right? And they're things that I like really want to do. And that's kind of the standard. If I'm bullshitting my way through life, or if I'm bullshitting somebody out of their money, like that, there's a karmic toll to that, you know, that a lot of people, they know it's there, but they don't care, right? I have I feel it more acutely, I think. I know that if I'm screwing with somebody or overplaying my hand, that eventually it'll come back to bite me in the ass. And I've had some good ass kickings throughout my life, so I just kind of hold on to that thing. And that's what I found to be the best way to increase value long term. I want the day that I die to be my most valuable day, and so I'm kind of sticking to that. I'm building projects that I want to build, that I'm inspired by, that I can continue to return to every single day, day in and day out, as many hours as it takes to do the thing properly. And then I want to produce something that like I would want to be inspired by, right? If I saw another artist do this thing, would it like hit me in the gut? Like, damn, why didn't I think of that? You know? So those are the that's basically the short answer is doing things that I absolutely want to do, that I would be inspired by if somebody else did it first.
Yeah.
So
No, that's awesome. So it's interesting that so I've never actually heard like the boho dance term, but it's
yeah.
interesting because, so to me, not knowing that history, like I always thought that people, posture on social media because social media, has the built-in, dopamine signals of likes and comments and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because the boho dance sounds like, the same thing with real world applications in terms of,
Yes.
you get sex or you get married or,
Right.
you get applause or whatever it is. And there was no social media. So it's
Yeah.
interesting because social media is not the issue. It's more like just what our brain is, programmed to do. Because
Yes.
you see people, or I see people that are in a shitty relationship. They fight all the time, but every post on social media is lovey-dovey, just, everything is perfect. Everything is 100% crystal. Like, the face is perfect. And it's like, you don't look like that. Like, you guys aren't that happy. Like, all that kind of, so it's interesting to see that kind of dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep rolling with that. That's an astute observation. Let me make this point. So the tech monopolies have become that way because they capitalized on those dopamine triggers, right? And I think that's pretty obvious, right? So they designed it to keep us coming back, but it was already hardware that we had. So they just had identified that, and they keep tweaking it and they keep making it better. And, it's like they allow shitty people to be on their platform because shitty people create engagement. But if they become too shitty, then the complaints are directed back at the social media, which they don't want to deal with. So then they just act. That's how they determine who they allow on their platform or not. Right. They want you to trigger people because it creates engagement. They don't care if it's good engagement or bad engagement. They just want engagement. They want the traffic. And so all of their AI, all of their algorithms are now fine-tuned to create that circumstance. And it can go on in perpetuity because we're not getting any different. And the more that we dig out these pathways in our mind and train ourselves to engage with social media, the richer that they're going to get.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and we went into this, and I don't know a ton about you in terms of your personal life and stuff to that extent, but just your analogies, just you. What level, like, what's your education look like? Because you come across as extremely educated and knowledgeable, and so I'm just curious, from my own side of things.
Well, so I mean, education is lifelong, right? And I love reading and just digging out these pathways day by day with work. Like I end up, tutorials, or I need to figure out how to do this specific thing. So my knowledge has gone from reading to visual, watching, that type of thing. So I graduated high school, no problem. I spent the least amount of time that I could at school, which actually ended up backfiring, and I ended up spending way more time at school with all the detention and everything. But school was a breeze. It was it was not a problem. And I kind of just shot from the hip all the way through, all the way through high school. I went to college for a quarter, just a community college near where I grew up. I went for a quarter after I got out of high school. But like as soon as I graduated was when I met my first art mentor. And so I was so focused on maximizing the amount of time that I was putting into my art that I couldn't be bothered to study anything. So I tried it, and then I dropped out after that. And then I was working, I've got 3 kids. So I was married at the time and was raising, my daughter with my wife at the time. And and working. I was working to support us. So sorry, my family is out over here.
Okay.
So basically, I'm like, I can't do this. I was working at Starbucks at the time. I went from barista to shift lead to assistant manager, and then transferred to like Fashion Island in Newport Beach, as a flagship store. And like my manager dropped off as this really epic thing in my mind and in history. We transformed the way that business was done.
Mhm.
And really, I just probably caused a lot of problems for everybody around me. But that was fun. It was like a project in and of itself, and it was a way to make decent money and support the people I loved and everything. But I got tired of it. I'm like, I can't do this. My calling is elsewhere. So when I was 27, I decided to go back to art school in Orange County. And can you hear my daughter back
Just
here? Or?
very minimally. It's not
Okay.
It's not bad
Okay.
at all.
All right. So I decided to go. Are you guys taking off? Okay. Have a fun time. All right. So we can cut that part. When I was 27, I decided to go to art school in Orange County. And I'm like, I just need to go and get a proper education, learn how to make video games. I want to be a concept artist, So I did that for 2 years. I actually went for media arts and animation. So I was learning 2D animation and the big boy stuff for like TV production and stuff like that, right? But you could choose a whole bunch of your classes. So I was like picking as many video game classes as I could. So a few months into school, I ended up getting a job at this small studio. And so I stopped working at Starbucks and started working full time at this small game studio. I mean, we're talking like 2 employees and 2 dudes that owned it, right? So I drank a lot of alcohol at the time too. So I thought that my artwork was way better than it actually was. So anyway, I was going to school full time and working full time and trying to raise this budding family, and that wasn't working. So I dropped my class load because I had to work full time. Dropped my class load, and they don't like it when you do that, apparently. So I was paying for a full load, only going to 3 classes, right? And after doing that for a couple quarters, I'm like, you guys are kind of dicks. Like, I'd appreciate it if you would work with me here. I literally don't have the time to do this. I can't. So like, okay, well, we'll help you out over here. And we'll like try to work this thing out over here. And so I don't know. I blew probably 15 grand just on wasted classes because that was just how it was. So ultimately, after 2 years, I ended up dropping out. I had a full-time job. I'd been working there for almost 2 years at that point. And it was good. We grew that team from 3 employees, me and 2 other people, to a team of about 20 people, right? So at that point, like Activision was producing our games, and it was pretty cool. We had like links with Square Enix and stuff. So we were building this thing into something special. And then I don't know where exactly to place the blame at that point, but it was like a series of decisions were made that backfired horrendously on the company, and so they let us go. But yeah, so I've got high school education. I have 2 years of art education, like formally, and then I have just however many hours and hours I put into teaching myself. So yeah, that's the answer to that, I guess.
Right. So
you haven't noticed, you asked me a really simple question, and then I have like this big story to tell you.
Oh, perfect. I mean, that's the benefit of long form, right?
Right,
works out
for
really
sure,
good.
for sure.
I mean, I've seen your pieces, and I like to like pull up people's artwork so that way other people can kind of see them. But I guess like before we get into other people seeing your artwork, I usually preface the podcast with people going to check out the artwork. But how do you describe your art?
Um, it's a good question. I think quite a bit about that. Um, it's the result of rebellion, I think. Like I don't really have a cause, you know. I do have a purpose that is mysterious to me, but I do know, like I feel a massive sense of destiny, like I'm doing something that is important. Um, but my motive day in and day out is the love of craftsmanship, you know. So I spend a lot of time uh, sculpting, not exactly sculpting, but that's the only way to describe it. I mean, I sculpt in ZBrush and that stuff, and I can sculpt, you know, in three dimensions too. But I spend a lot of time sculpting form out of chaos. So I'm just programmed that way. So I'll create a series of problems for myself, and then I'm solution oriented by nature, and so I don't know. It's dualistic in that way, because I can destroy something very fast. Like if I get angry or frustrated with something, like I can destroy a situation or a life, or, you know, like I just have that capacity to do that. So my artwork is a result of controlling that aspect of Thanatos, like the death urge, controlling that and focusing it to be able to ultimately create a set of solvable problems that provides me enough feedback and inspiration and reason to continue to produce the artwork. So ultimately, I believe that these artworks are already made, like looking at things from an eternal perspective. The all at onceness. Each of the things that I end up making are already fashioned in an ideal form, and so as I get closer to the end of a piece, I start to have deja vu repeatedly, which tells me that, like, I'm on the right path. Like all of the topsy-turvy, upside down stuff that I went through to get there, when a piece is coming to its final form, I'll start to get these triggers of deja vu, which tells me that I've done the work properly. But every single time I start, that's a complete mystery. I don't know that that's going to happen. It's a faith-based process, and it just has become something that's worked. So let me see if I can kind of distill that down easier. My artwork is the result of an attractor that is outside of time, an ideal form, combined with the linear progression of consciously and remaining focused on generating chaos that can be turned into something. And because I'm solution oriented, I want to solve every single puzzle within that particular piece of artwork to ultimately have the experience of creation on my way back home to the ideal form. That's what I would say it is. Whether that is real, I don't know. I believe it seems to work. I think that my images ultimately are quite beautiful, you know, and I think that is not so much a result of who I am as a person, as I believe that God, like the creator, is the source of beauty, and so I'm trying to attune myself and align myself with that as much as possible in order to be able to do that justice. I guess that's the answer.
No, I mean, I definitely agree with the pieces. It's very. I've mentioned this before. I'm not artistically oriented. I'm interested in the space, and that drives me, and that's kind of
Yeah.
it. And I
Yeah.
just let it flow, right?
Cool.
But other than that, like for me, it's interesting to hear like that, where the guy that I had on a couple days ago, William the Third, he sets out the day before and he sets his mind on something and then goes to work. So it's
Mm.
interesting to hear you kind of, almost like manifest from, you know, from the creator kind of thing. Like that's like a really interesting take. Do you? It's do you have like trouble in terms of feeling like you're doing something's wrong at some points? Then.
Oh yeah. So that is part of the fascination, I think, is like each piece is totally faith-based,
Mm.
like at the beginning. And as I get closer, the kind of the revelation or the awe-inspiring aspects of it start to come into focus. But at the beginning, all I have to go on is like, I've done this a number of times before. And so if I do it again, I believe that I can pull it off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. It's a totally faith-based process. I spend maybe too much time on my work. See, like from a sustainable financial model,
Mm-hmm.
it's not great. I wouldn't recommend it because the amount of grit and perseverance that's required and uncertainty just in general is very high.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of not knowing how things are going to work out is a lot, sometimes too much.
Mm-hmm.
There's that, and then there's this other timeline, which is like it's exactly right. So learning to let go of things that I think I need in the world, learning to be okay with everything that I have, and learning to have gratitude for what I have, feast or famine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is ultimately that is the personal kind of healing journey that the whole thing is contributing to, I guess. So I would not recommend how I go through my process to anybody else, because it can be horrendous and shitty.
Mm-hmm.
but also it's authentic and the most rewarding thing I could possibly think of, so I've been inspired by Android Jones over the years, and I found him when I was at school. I think I came across him because I was looking at Massive Black, which he was engaged with initiating, and he does a similar thing. I was drawn to him because like he works in the same way, except at the time he was years ahead of me, and so he'd already like worked out this process, and he's I would say he's more of like a performance artist than a painter or something. He's really focused on producing and the show element of creating artwork. And so he worked with Corel early on when they were developing the modern tools that they have in Painter.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if I'm not mistaken, like they actually like fashioned some tools around what he needed and stuff. So he's blazed like a series of trails and techniques and things. But like if Andrew Jones, with the exception of probably, I don't know, just off the top of my head, 10 pieces, if he gave me any one of his works, except for the about 10 pieces, I would be able to take it and work on it for like another 2 months, right? So but the process is very similar. He starts from chaos, creates a series of problems and issues for himself, and then kind of places things in a dynamic way that is compelling. And then when it looks nice, he's like, boom, done.
Yeah.
You know, when it looks nice, I'm like, okay, where's the story at? What's happening here? What kind of knowledge can I preserve, for somebody in 100 years or in 500 years? Like, my thinking is very oriented towards the preservation of legends and things like that. And so I wish I could stop a lot of times, but it's at those points when I wish I could stop the piece, it's not my work. It doesn't have that fingerprint that makes my work my work. And so, when I feel that, that's when I figure it's done.
Nice. So I had asked this question before to other people as well. And so do you feel like a lot of your pieces are like similar within like a style where, like, to me, I feel like I could, maybe not perfectly, but I could see your pieces in an array of many pieces and be like, oh, this is what you've done. Do you
cool.
think that this is going to be your plan, like, longer term, that this is your style, or is this going to be a phase, or how do you kind of see that?
So the longer that I create artwork, the more techniques I come across that kind of wow me, I guess. So basically that has been, to this point, it's been, half of my life that I've been seeking a voice or a style or something like that. So what defines my work versus any other recognizable artist is that I could work with any material and produce almost anything, any subject, in a coherent, cohesive style where you would, let's say I recreated, I don't know, The Last Supper or something. You would be able to look at those two things and say, that one was done by Eloh and that one was done by Da Vinci, right? Hopefully mine is not shittier than his, but right, like I do intend to, I aspire to create work that is on that kind of mythical, legendary level. I want my digital art to be the quality of fine art. It's something that's very important to me. And I started as a traditional artist, so I carry all that stuff over into my digital work, and it's very, very important that my work is quality. I don't like breaking that fourth wall. And looking back at my older stuff, I'm like, oh man, I want to keep going on it. I want to fix it, or whatever. And I've really got to, just, it is what it is. That's time, and just let it go. But so my work is the result of a series of techniques that I gravitate towards, that I feel like are things that, I'll keep with me the things that I've discovered on my own, and then I have, that's like my primary weaponry, so to speak. My primary artillery are the techniques that I have discovered just from doing this for thousands of hours. And then the larger body of techniques are things that I have, learned from any number of artists, and then you have below that, like the foundation skills, the rules that should be there, that you should know, that you then you learn how to break or bend or whatever. So I would say, what you see now is my voice. The work that I produce now is the way that I'm going to continue to do things. It doesn't mean that I won't do other things and other styles just to branch out, but ultimately the thing that I do, how you would recognize my work, is how my work is going to be. In perpetuity for the foreseeable future, as far as I can imagine, because it's mine. I've discovered it through hard work, and it's mine, you know. So
So for you, do you have like other? Are you still working in like a more physical sense in just different paintings, and like do you have that going on in terms of working with your art and just brushstrokes to that extent? And like, is there any other like hobbies that you have that kind of overlap and help with art in general?
um well, short answer is no. It's all one thing.
Mhm.
So like everything that I do, I want it to funnel back into my 2D digital artwork.
Mhm.
Um, like if I can, well, I work in 3D. I like sculpting in 3D also, in ZBrush. Um, and I think the goal, like a way to take this thing, would be, once I get my 2D absolutely locked in, where I feel like I've done all the stuff that I want to do. Now I can just pick and choose anything and be able to do it.
Mhm.
Then I want to take that thing and I want to figure out how to export it into 3D. So learn how to craft my 3D images and objects, so that if you're looking at one of my 3D works, you can tell that this comes from this. It's the same thing. And I'm a ways off from that. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I am working on that. And I use a lot of 3D in my 2D work. So there is a bridge between the two. But ultimately, I think I want to get my 3D work to be what my 2D work is, except I'm able to animate it and move it and create a movie or something. As far as other hobbies go, I love reading. This last 4 years, like politicking, that has been my thing. I've been immersed in the meme war and all this stuff, and my politics are highly unfavored by the rest of the people around me, because I like what I like, and I it was it was a rude awakening, realizing that I had joined the ranks of supposedly some of the most free thinking, accepting people on the planet,
Mhm.
only to find out that, um, if you enjoy something that they collectively have decided they don't like,
Mhm.
that you're in for it, right? And so, I like sparring, intellectual sparring. I like conversation. I like duking it out and battling it out, social media or in person or whatever. I really like the clash of and the competitive nature of politics,
Mhm.
right? So I would say that is my hobby, and that keeps the mind sharp and all that stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, I grew up skateboarding and snowboarding, and it's almost everything I do now is, art is the primary focus. So if I'm like, my time with my family is my rest,
Mhm.
um, but also my artwork is my rest. So I would say that I enjoy those things equally, but there's like a larger drive. Like, I support the family, so there's that aspect that goes into the artwork too.
Mhm.
So I would say just about anything I do comes back to the art. If it doesn't if it doesn't directly pertain to it, then I kind of can't work with it.
Mhm.
So, like, I enjoy exercise and all these stuff. It's like necessary, like maintenance things.
Mhm.
Um, but like, if I go on a walk outside, it's to get my mind away from creating and get my eyes off the screen, but like my mind is still like, oh, look at the neat perspective on that thing. How could I incorporate that? So I don't know. I don't really have any extraneous hobbies or anything that I really do just for the fuck of it.
I mean, 100%, right? Like that's like 100% all in terms of one thing.
Yeah.
That was something that came out of the last podcast too, which is like, don't fear the man who practices 1,000 kicks, fear the man who practices one kick 1,000 times.
You're right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that like a jack of all trades might not lead you to be the best at what you do, right? Like in terms of your pursuit, in terms of manifesting your art in the way that you do. And so if you were trying, different art styles or other things, it might detract from that.
Right.
I've like grown up, and like I guess sports is semi-relevant, playing like a ton of sports. You find the overlap of things that you do in like ping pong. There's like the English on the spin, right? And so like learning that, I learned how to shoot layups differently in terms of basketball because that spin on like a layup kind of thing. And so there's some overlap, but at the same time, if I realized that I was only going to be 5'9", I shouldn't have wasted my time playing basketball. I should have just played soccer or something.
You can make a great point guard, man.
No, that's out of the window. But yeah, it's all good. For you, talking more in terms of like recent history and stuff, obviously COVID is impactful, and you have mentioned getting your mind right and stuff. How has COVID affected like art and I guess like the space in general for you?
It hasn't changed anything about my life except having to wear a mask and wanting to go out less. But like, maybe that's kind of like a little example of a hobby. Like sometimes I like to go into a place without a mask just to see if somebody will ask me to wear a mask, like I don't really like want a conflict or something stupid, but just like what can I get away with? I like learning about propaganda. That also hasn't changed because I've always done that. But seeing the rollout of full court press propaganda 24/7 in real time has been fascinating and frustrating, and ultimately just drives me back into wanting to create things that break that up a little bit. So I'm not like a denier of this whole thing. I just there are some obvious facts about it that are not easily acknowledged unless you're kind of like a denier, right? Type of thing. Like you have a little bit of that. Like I'm just looking at the death tickers on every channel constantly. And, and then you see like a number of doctors that are like, dude, they're like bullshitting, on all these fronts. Like we're required to, mark this thing. If they've had COVID in the last 28 days, we're required to mark the death down, even if it wasn't COVID, like, so there's all these things that you're like, what the hell's going on? And then you find out about the PCR test, and they're running just like huge number of cycles on it to pick up any trace of this thing. And you're like, well, you're going to end up with a bunch of false positives. Like I'm not a scientist, but that's just kind of logical. And you're going to end up with a bunch of false positives. And then you see doctors, MDs, who are like, yeah, what happens when you run that many, cycles is you end up with a bunch of false positives. And then lo and behold, like after January 20th, within an hour, the WHO is like, oh yeah, well, we just want to reduce the number of cycles that we're running there, because like now they're winding the whole thing down, right? So it's interesting. I don't know exactly what the whole purpose of all of American politics and geopolitics. I don't know what the whole purpose is, but it does seem to be that they're wanting to develop some type of centralized panopticon, like they want one thing at the top of the pyramid, that keystone, and they want to be able to observe all points and manage all aspects of society from that centralized point, right? So I think the rugged individualism of the United States poses a problem when you're trying to create a collectivist society. And so there's a need to kind of bring us to our knees, to confuse us, to panic us, to create perpetual anxiety so that we kind of drop our weapons, so to speak, literally, metaphorically. We drop our weapons, we drop our guard, and we start to depend more and more on a state, right? And this goes beyond like a conspiracy theory. This is like how systems naturally operate, which is why I'm personally fascinated with the blockchain and decentralization and peer-to-peer finance. It's like an immune response to the tendency, like the scientific law that things organize in hierarchy. And it's like, is it easier to, manage 269 different nations or whatever the number is? Or is it easier to say, yeah, sure, you're that nation, but we all operate on a single currency. We've got a single ledger. We all have a single passport that gets you anywhere. You all operate on the same rules. You're going to have to set your religion aside because, whatever, keep your religion, but, Caesar, you're going to pay your taxes to Caesar. And if you fucking chop up, we're going to knock you down. Like centralized military reduction, conflict reduction. It seems like naturally you would want that as you're preparing to kind of launch off into the stars. You want a unified theory that governs the planet. So I don't personally think that's necessary. I think that competition, the elite say competition is a sin, but competition is kind of it's the flip side of the coin to the cooperation aspect of it, right? So you have these people who say competition is a sin, but they're competing against our sensibilities, right? Constantly. They're constantly planning 10 years, 20 years, 30 years out in the future. And then they're like, okay. And they're like corralling us into this, tighter and tighter funneling system until we just finally give up. We're like, oh, I guess we're in line now,
Yeah.
So that, to bring that back around, what has COVID changed for my life? Nothing in the day to day except for the routine, mask wearing and using hand sanitizer after you touch something, and staying away from older folks and just out of courtesy or whatever. That just the basic stuff. But beyond that, my life day in and day out has not changed. I have been doing this for a number of years now. All of my business is through social media, online. Yeah, that's it. I mean, the biggest thing is just the kind of the wow factor of like seeing the full court media press and the result of it, the great reset and all of these ideas and Agenda 21 rolling into Agenda 30 and like watching all of this stuff pan out in real time is kind of intimidating, I guess. That would be the biggest change.
Do you think that crypto will have enough of a disrupt capability versus what you're talking about in terms of like overarching planning?
That's an interesting question. This one could be a little bit longer to answer, if you got a minute. Yeah, it does. But it's like this. So we are the whole of humanity. We're dispensable, right? We don't have to be here. They've made their money. We've built everything that they need, and there is some evidence loose to point to the fact that actually the people in charge would prefer that we weren't here. So I think whatever we're going to do to disrupt that needs to take that into account. Like the average person doesn't have a bunker and 2 years worth of food to ride out a nuclear winter or something. We are the nuclear winter. So remembering that the people who are kind of devising and planning the future, they have the means to withstand a proper backlash. They also have the monopoly on violence because they control the militaries, right? So yeah, we have got 300 million guns in the United States, but that's just a foolish notion. I mean, it would be absolute mayhem and nobody would win. There's no point. It's not even mutually assured destruction. It's like we'd kill each other, we'd kill some of them, and then everybody goes away and it results in the same end game, right? So the fact that there are so many guns doesn't really change anything. It's the part about constitutionally, the part about keeping a tyrannical government in check is kind of, they figured out so many ways to get around that without us even caring or noticing. Like, here's some money, shut up. That's basically, everybody is thinking about their well-being and how to take care of their family. And these people are beyond that. They're beyond survival at this point. They're into total creative planning, So the blockchain does have the ability to disrupt, but we can't ever underestimate the depravity of those who we are trying to disrupt, because they will win no matter what. So whatever we do needs to it needs to be agile, and it needs to be creative, and it needs to ultimately provide value for the system as a whole, right? Like, really what we want to do is we want to figure out how we can make humanity indispensable. It's figuring out finance and how to survive. Those are all important things, but like the real goal that we should have is, how do we make ourselves indispensable, not only on an individual level, but then collectively? How do we make it so that the people who are designing our future for us actually cannot live without the whole of us? And that is a question I don't think anybody has the answer to. So, I don't know who Satoshi is. I know that, like, the blockchain was originally it was devised as like a time stamping technology, just like small scale, and then I believe Satoshi realized the import of it and is like, whoa, and then built the currency on it and everything, and then now it's become what it is. But I think there's a lot of stuff that we can't anticipate arising, a lot of novel forms, a lot of things that are not foreseeable, really abstract concepts that aren't kind of written into the playbook yet, and those are unknowable. How far the blockchain will disrupt will always be limited by how much value it creates for not only everybody as a whole, but ultimately for those who are designing the future, right? So it will disrupt traditional systems, and that's a good thing, because traditional systems are clunky and they're outdated and things are moving very, very quickly. But is it going to disrupt, to turn every man into a king? No, it's not, because that's not a law of nature, right? Like that's what the Bible is for, or whatever religion. Your 72 virgins in heaven. That's what the ideal perfect realm is, beyond the grave. The world always has been and based on that history, probably always will be hierarchical, and competitive and cooperative simultaneously, and ultimately the keystone of that pyramidal structure, the keystone ultimately decides how valuable any of the other rungs are. Like, you can take out a lot of the base and still have a pyramid stand. You know, if you have the right tools, you can take out the whole bottom base and just drop the thing down a level. You know, you could do that the whole way. And that, so that's the kind of tech that we're dealing with now, is these guys up on top. We built all this shit. Now they've got it, and they have the resources and the finances to be able to take it and start removing things below them so that they don't have to deal with it anymore, right? And I think that there is a psychotic element that is at play that, you know, we should be aware of. You know, it doesn't mean that all of them are psychotic. It doesn't mean that the world is inherently, you know, twisted or anything, or that love doesn't exist or God doesn't exist or any of that stuff, but definitely a part of it. You know, there's a reason that vipers have fangs and venom, you know, like there is a reason that bunny rabbits, you know, stay out of the sight of hawks. You know, it's just like that. There are functions evolutionarily, nature, nurture. There are a bunch of things that play here that we can only disrupt it so far as to catalyze future evolution that ultimately it's got to benefit somebody above us. That's just the way it is. So as long as we're doing that, like, this thing will persist. If it ceases doing that, then, I mean, I don't know, like, has anybody like ever thought about, like, what if they just took out the entire power grid, you know, and you can't access the internet? I mean, what the fuck good is the blockchain then, you know? Like, like, I mean, that's like, and they're willing to do it, you know? So whatever, if we're not adding value and we're like stealing from them, you know, they're the commander and thief, or the thieves in command, or whatever. That was a terrible analogy. I botched that one. We have to remember that these people rise to the top because, you know, there is divine providence, but there's also a lot of depravity, and they're going to take what they take, and you're not going to do anything about it, you know? So whatever we disrupt, we have to be thinking in terms of what value we're providing, that it's not necessarily value directly for, it's not like we're serving our overlords. Like, we might be providing value for the whole of humanity, but let's say that value provides, you know, is ubiquitous, and that makes it easier for them. Like, they don't have to fucking worry about it. You know, that's the kind of disruption I think that we should be thinking about as this whole thing plays out. But beyond that, the greater goal is, how do we make ourselves collectively indispensable? And I don't think that we've answered that question yet.
So for you, like, obviously, well, it seems like obviously power is one aspect, but money is also power in some sense of linear, right?
Yeah.
So as far as you're concerned, obviously we talked about like the karmic aspect and stuff to that extent, but why not try to ascend, for lack of a better word, upwards towards a more, you know, secure position, say?
Well, right. I mean, that's the other path, right? Like, so you can do all of this stuff and still do this thing, right? Like, it's only when this thing begins to threaten this thing that you have a problem, right? So you can be a devout, faithful follower of Jesus Christ or Kali or Shiva or whomever, and be a janitor for 40 years, right? You could do the same and be the head of a multinational corporation, right? And so long as this thing, see, the Romans figured this out, right? and so did the founding fathers of the United States, that freedom of religion is key because it normally does not conflict with the state, right? They're like, you can worship whatever you want, you can believe whatever you want, but you can't force anybody else to believe anything that you believe, right? Like that's where it stops. You cannot use violence or infringe upon somebody else's pursuit of their own thing.
Yeah.
Now, where it gets wonky is that the state can do whatever it wants at any point. They can say Muslims are terrorists. Then if they feel like changing it up, they could say Christians are terrorists. You know, they could say both of you guys are terrorists and neither of you are allowed to travel, you know. So it's just a reality of it, right?
Yeah.
It's not like it's good or bad or whatever. I would say probably it's worse than better, because they can dictate to you at any given point because they have the monopoly on violence.
Yeah.
So that's where martyrs are, you know, that's where martyrs come from, essentially, is people who say, you'll never take this from me no matter what. I don't care what you do to me or how much I have to suffer. You cannot take this thing from me, right?
Yeah.
And those people serve a fundamental role in keeping the state accountable, because you can only have so many of those things happen before your workforce is gone or whatever, right? So like when I'm describing this, I'm not saying like you should be depraved like they are or depraved like they are or you should be you know, serving them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that this is just a reality of the way that the world is. There are these people and they're primarily composed of a certain type, you know, and they're a thing, you know.
Yeah.
And they have the resources and the means and the will to make shit happen. And it's like, you can either go along with that and provide value with that thing, because it's a lot of it's like pretty cool, you know, like the Egyptian empire was composed of the same type of people. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
You know, like and you have a proper ayahuasca experience. Like maybe not you, a lot of people have you know, experiences of you know, Egyptian linguistics, or I was in an Egyptian tomb, or, you know, same thing with the Maya. Like the Maya, the leadership was psychotic, absolutely psychotic, you know. That's an argument that, like, presently the psychedelic community is like mystified that like fascists, you know, would take psychedelics or something. How can you take psychedelics and support Donald Trump? It's like this like scare. It's like a red scare, except, you know, weird. And I think the point to that is like, well, dude, like, I mean, multicultural, you know, empires are not new, but they're newer than traditional value systems. And psychedelics, like, from the beginning have been ethnocentric and, you know, tribalist, and like before there was interaction across oceans or air travel or trading among, you know, countries, and, you know, like there were just these pockets of intelligence, pockets of communities. And so like they believed all kinds of stuff individually that was their own, and they most of all of them had some type of intoxicant or psychedelic experience. So like it's strange, like we're rewriting history as we're experiencing it, and then we're like, you're fucking weird. You're like, no, dude, actually, like you are. Like you're the new thing. You're the strange one here. So I'm just discussing all of this stuff as like it is what it is. It's not like I'm not advocating for this thing over this thing. Like I am a Christian, you know, that doesn't fly well with the people that are around me, because most of them are like, their DMT trips show them, you know, the gods, the Hindu gods and all this stuff. I mean, I've come to my faith through a series of severe tribulation, and the psychedelics kind of made the space in me where I came to the conclusion that this is what was for me, right? And it's mine, it's just my thing. I'm not like trying to, evangelize anybody. It's just my thing. So I do this at the same time that I create psychedelic artwork, at the same time that I'm, supporting my family and making a living with all different types of people. Same time I'm interacting with NFTs and the blockchain and all this stuff, right? Like, you can have a whole bunch of spokes in that wheel.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about on a large scale disruption. Ultimately, you can disrupt and think you're a badass until you catch somebody's attention. And then you can disrupt and you can be a badass until they like punch you in the face. And then you can continue to disrupt and cause problems, and then you have 3 people watching you or on you or, punching you in the head. And then it's 20. And then, when you have unlimited amounts of violence at your disposal, there's only so much disruption that's actually going to go on, right? So ultimately what you're left with is, how do I make myself valuable for the way that things are going, and that's really the question that needs to be answered, I think, as a whole.
Yeah. Did you ever watch, it's new on Amazon Prime Video, it is Utopia?
No, I've heard about it though.
So it's relevant in that it's hyper relevant to this past year, because it's about a world where viruses get unleashed, and there's comic books that are written, and through deciphering some of the comic books, this is very early on, like very low spoilers, but this is basically the plot, is that in the comic book, there's hints towards like different diseases, right? Like, say like a tiny head for Zika virus, right? And then like the actual, what the protein of the virus looks like, or something to that extent, right?
Interesting.
And so a new comic book comes out, and they're trying to find it, because if they can get a hold of it early, they can find the next brand of, whatever, viruses and stuff to that extent.
Right.
But one of the characters in the show asks, like, what value have you brought to the world today? And it's when you first start, like, for me personally, like, I think that's like really big, right? Like, you're talking about it in terms of like more the macro perspective, and almost like kind of like a ruling class, but just in terms of your day-to-day life, like, I think that that's like a good philosophy to ask yourself, what did you do to bring good to the world, right? Even if it's just something small, you held the elevator door, or you helped somebody carry stuff up. Like, bringing value in some form or another helps to like uplift people. And so even from like the micro perspective versus your more macro perspective in terms of like value of your life, but I think that there's still something to that.
Well, there's that is a feedback loop, man. So exactly, like, yes, I'm discussing this from a macro perspective, but this totally comes from day to day, moment to moment. Like right now, I mean, you're providing value to me by hosting me and bringing up these questions and providing a space for me to talk, and hopefully I'm offering that in return, right? Like this is what it is all about, So taking that and extrapolating that, using that as your pole star, right? And then figuring out how to spread that. It's not always going to be pretty, and it doesn't even have to be liked, right? Like, some of the most effective medicines are the worst tasting, right? And they have some brutal side effects at some points, So that's a big thing too. Like I trust that what I am doing, because I'm focused on value, right? It's ingrained in me. I want to produce artworks that not only have monetary value. It's weird. It's like a backwards thing, right? Like I infuse the work with spiritual and personal and psychic value. And then you have to figure out how that can do something for somebody else, right? So there's no way to like really make a sales pitch for that. Like, if you look at my artwork, it's going to enlighten you, you can't do it because people will be like, get the fuck out of here. And then they'll never look at it, So it's a long process. People need to kind of discover that these things have, intrinsic value of their own accord, but that macro picture that starts from a moment to moment peer-to-peer interaction. That's why the blockchain is valuable. It just is inherently valuable. So the emphasis on what it's going to do to disrupt, that's just going to happen because naturally people want better stuff. And so that's the solution that the blockchain provides is, damn, like this is like verifiable, it's open, it's decentralized, it's peer-to-peer. I don't need all of this like clunky bullshit insurance to make it work, like totally my responsibility, which comes with its downside. I mean, it's like kind of dangerous freedom. I read an article recently of a dude that lost his wallet or just lost his address or something. He had like $260 million in cryptocurrency. Like, fuck you. Like, was it really that important to you? I mean,
When he lost it was probably worth, whatever, $200, $300.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. Huh? Yeah, so you're totally right. Like those moment to moment, peer to peer, friendly, wonderful interactions that we have consciously with the world is ultimately, that's the other part of the dialectic, right? So that psychotic ruling class, I guess, that is maybe the answer of how we make ourselves indispensable. So it's not going to be like a new world order just where they tell everybody what to do, because we're beyond that. We're awake, we're wide awake for the most part. I mean, not everybody, but like it's happening.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, Trump was key in that process. Like, don't care what you think about him. Like, this last 4 years has been key for getting people's fat asses up off their couch.
Take care.
So like we are in this process of like, we're not going to tolerate the bullshit so much anymore, but like, we can't just get up in arms about it and get all angry about it. Like, it's okay to be frustrated and, you can talk all the shit that you want, whatever, like, it's fine. You're not required to behave some way, especially if you work for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you can do your thing as you're going to do your thing. But ultimately, what that quote unquote new world order is going to be is a dialectic between good and evil, and then all of the spectrum in between of those things, right? You're going to have something that is representative of all of the people that are on the planet. And I don't think it's going to end poorly. I think it's actually like our sensibility toward goodness and providing value. Like, ultimately, that is what is going to keep the thing on track, right? Like, it can be really kept on track by, a fascist, authoritarian system, like, and there's going to be elements of that, you're just not going to get away from it. It's just like, anarchy is not in the cards. It's just not going to happen. Like, they might use anarchy to get other stuff to happen, but that's not order. Out of chaos is the Masonic philosophy, right? And not all these people are Masons, it's, but that's the idea, right? So you have the breakdown of a system, and then the rebirth of the phoenix, essentially, into the new form. And along with that comes all of the things that we need, which are like, most of us are not revolutionary. Most of us don't want to, live in squalor and like really, have these set value systems that we're never going to break. Like, most of us like just kind of want to wake up and like think that, it's a good day and everything's okay, like, damn, I'm grateful for my family, and I'm grateful to be able to do this stuff. And like, that is a massive imprint on like the archetypal realm of reality. Like, there are so many people that want that thing that like, it's almost like science that it's going to be that way, you know. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be lorded over by, you know, but most, who fucking needs like 10 palaces, you know? There are some people that are like that, and they're kind of weird, you know, frankly. I mean, like the urges to power over people, I just don't want you to step on my toes, that's all. You know, and I think most people are like that, like you know, it's kind of a hillbilly backwater, was get the fuck off my property. You know, that's all. I just want my space, man. I just don't want you to screw with my shit, that's all. You know, I'm not going to take your shit, like just stay away from mine. And then there's like that mutual pact, and then you get along, and it's like, I don't know, it's pretty reasonable.
Definitely. Okay, so I'm out of questions, and I'd like to go into your pieces. Before we do that, this is kind of, I guess, going to be my closing question from now on, is if you're in my shoes, what question would you want to be asked?
I don't know, man. I don't really. Well, see, so I'm going to dig here because I want to provide you some value. Since you asked me the question, let me dig here. All right, let's go into the next segment. Let's do the pieces, and by the end of it, I should have your answer.
Okay. All right. So I have a couple of your pieces pulled up on Instagram, and I just like to, you know, kind of pick a couple of pieces. This, I don't have the title. I have to make sure that it's correct on the page to showcase it, which I'm going to try and have. I'm still working out how to fully show these things. Where like I'm not cropping it. Crap. You don't have a title. It is. You're the first person without a title on Works. It is April 27, 2019, which is not going to help you at all. Let me see. Maybe
it helps a little bit, but
let me see if I just go live with my screen.
I think you can share it with me.
Yeah, I think so. Do it. Am I live with the screen?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So that's called.
Oh, all right. It's on the side.
Yeah, it's called Anarcupid. Yeah. So what do you want to know about it?
I just wanted to like showcase the piece. Anything that you like to get into with it in terms of inspiration or, you know, key details, stuff to that extent.
Yeah. All right. So let's go back so I can see your face. It's easier to talk to you that way.
I am still learning Zoom, which feels very stupid. But
that's all right. Is there a button at the bottom?
No.
If you scroll down, do you get like a little pop-up at the bottom of your screen?
I have like the little pop-up of us.
Sorry, not scroll. Just move your cursor to the very bottom of your screen.
No, nothing.
You don't get the bar that shows up? All right.
Stop share. There you go. That should be it.
There you go.
Cool.
All right, cool. Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story. Anarcupid, the title is conjugation, I guess, of anarchy and then the Greek demigods, I guess. Are they demigods? They might be full gods. Cupid was the offspring of Venus and Mars, I believe. So anyway, it's kind of flies in the face of everything we were just talking about. But the idea behind the title is that dialectic, the merging of like a wild spirit with love, right? So that piece was commissioned by a pin company. I won't mention their name because I don't want to give them any publicity. But commissioned by a pin company. So each of those three heads became pins. And then that image was a tapestry. So yeah, they were looking for a series of things, and it just kind of occurred to me to do it this way. And so I don't know, are you familiar with Encetigris?
No.
Oh, he's a wonderful psychedelic artist, um, illustrator. But so he was kind of on my mind at the time, because I'm like he has this effect on the DMT space that, so before I saw his work, my visuals were very different. After I saw his work, my visuals started to resemble his in certain ways, resemble his artwork. And I mean, he went off like an explosion when he showed up. My friend Stephen Heyman kind of introduced the Visionary Festival community to him. He started using some of his work in his VJ sets and stuff. And then Encetigris just took off. And I'm like watching people reflect on his stuff, and they're like, dude, I've totally been to this place. And when I first saw his work, I knew exactly what drugs he was taking, but I had never seen anything like that. But it just had this feeling that like he was seeing this stuff. And so the DMT trips after that, I would start to see these checkered patterns and stuff like constantly. And so that led me into a series of like theories about how consciousness influences psychedelics and how they can potentially be hacked by somebody who knows what they're doing. And basically I came to this conclusion that like Encetigris is some type of conduit and like a magician. So he's created this feedback loop with DMT space to where like he has his nature and how he views artwork, and he's like uploading that into the space at the same time that he's receiving these visions that are kind of focusing and instructing how he creates his artwork. And so since then I'm like, wow, dude, yeah, so I must be doing that in some way too. And that's kind of interesting. I've had people come to me since then and be like, dude, this thing right here, like I've had this interaction with this thing, which led me to the conclusion that like the piece may already exist in eternity somewhere, and like I'm just being attracted to this thing and experiencing its creation. So anyway, that's kind of some backstory on that. AnarCupid, that piece, those three heads came from the need to meet the client standard of having these three pins, and then also be able to produce a tapestry from this thing at the same time. So that's why it is what it is. It's influenced hugely by the way that DMT works for me, which is symmetric. A lot of my work is symmetric, which has resulted in a lot of people coming to me for symmetric work and me not wanting to produce symmetric work anymore. So the balance that I found is create symmetry and then break the symmetry in a way that doesn't actually disrupt people's experience of it being symmetric. So that's kind of why it looks the way it does. You have a very symmetric head in the center, and then the two heads are different. And then how the magic and visuals kind of interact with those things creates the sensation that it does. So that's probably my least substantial piece of them. It's very highly design oriented, and it's informed by psychedelics. Like the impact that psychedelics have had on my artwork throughout the years is so profound that it's like I feel an obligation almost to do them justice in some way. So it's informed by psychedelics. It's informed by a love of illustration. It's informed by the need of the client. And then just basically that present in the moment generative process of creation is why it looks the way it does.
So do you want to not talk about another client piece Or
Well, actually, a majority of my work, um, well, that's interesting. Almost every one of those things that you pick is going to have somebody's influence to varying or greater or lesser degrees. But so it doesn't really matter. But I have a ton of artistic liberty. But something that I enjoy doing, it's one of my favorite things actually, is to work with clients. So somebody comes and they say, I have this idea. I want a world, and I like blue, or this is my favorite flower or something like that.
Mhm.
And then they're like, I want you to create something from that. So ultimately, a lot of client work is almost a telepathic connection that's created,
Mhm.
which is the client has their vision and they come to me, so what they're telling me by coming to me in the first place, offering to pay money to exchange that value, that energy,
Mhm.
they're saying, I have this vision and I believe that you can do it,
Yeah.
and then my responsibility is to take that and to make sure that we're hitting all of these points as we go.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is about exceeding the vision. It's
Mhm.
all about transcending that process so that the final product is what they were thinking,
Mhm.
but like they couldn't have imagined. That's my role as the artist, is to bring their thing to reality, but then I want them to be like, whoa,
Yeah.
So um, that's how it just conveniently works toward creating deep, meaningful relationships with the
Mhm.
clients that I have. So you could pretty much choose any one of them, and they'll probably have somebody's influence in some way,
Mhm.
or so go ahead.
All right. So I chose. I'm just gonna pull it up. It's the Knight Rider 2019 client, Forever
Yeah,
Psychedelic. Do you want me to pull it
yeah,
up for you? Or you know the image.
yeah, I know the image.
Okay.
So I created a white elephant that's on a light background, and that was a commission for my sister. And so she has this fascination with elephants in Thailand and everything, and so she wanted me to create something for her for Christmas or her birthday or something, right? So
Mm.
that piece came out of that process. Then the Knight Rider, um, that so Goa Hue, Goa.hu, they're a psychedelic production company in Hungary.
Mm.
Um, Gabber, the CEO, that came to me and he's like, I really like this piece, and his partner, or she's like, I like this piece and I like this piece, and so they gave me some idea of what they were looking for, but we really like the elephant that you've done. So um, basically they're like, yeah, we like this elephant, but we want something that looks psychedelic. So
Mm.
I took the day rider, the white elephant, and um, use that as the template, and then just started building on these kind of like biomechanical forms, and using the filaments and repetition of the psychedelic space. And then I wanted to evoke a creature or an entity that one could potentially see in a psychedelic trip. So
Mm.
um, they put on a show called Forever Psychedelic, um, and this was representative of that. So that's about the extent of the constraints that I have usually
Mm.
with a piece. Is like, I like this one, and I want it to serve this function over here, and
Mm.
then go with it. So that was how that arose. That was another one that there's not a whole lot of um, like legend or myth woven into it. It's more of like a design piece.
Mm.
So
All right. That was my two. Do
yeah,
you do you have a question for yourself?
yeah. I would say the question that I would want to be asked, the thing I could probably talk the longest on, is like, what do you think your purpose is? So that's not the most readily I couldn't give you an answer right off the top,
Mhm.
but it would provide enough space, because I do enjoy talking and I do enjoy discovering ideas in the moment as I talk.
Mhm.
So that's a broad enough question that, and I don't know the answer to it, so I could start from a spot and kind of wind my way around and end up at some place really neat that would inspire me at the end of it.
Mhm.
So that would be the question. Like, what do you think your purpose is on Earth?
Mhm. You want to go into it or no?
Oh Lord, how much time do you have?
uh, Probably like 5-10 minutes. I
Okay,
gotta.
yeah, we could figure that out. Yeah, let's do that. Let me run and use the restroom real quick. Can you cut
We'll
this
both
out?
do it. We'll both do it.
Okay,
Perfect.
all right, cool.
That's
I'll
my
meet you
five
back
ten
here.
minutes. It's perfect.
All right, right on. All right, you got me?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, cool. All right. These are nice. Just get kind of little swigs.
Yeah, it looks like a
Keep you
little
warm.
like a camping rig.
Yeah, it's got a tiny little opening here, so even if I wanted to swill off of it, it kind of limits me, prohibits my drunkenness. Yeah, I don't hardly drink at all anymore. It's just conversation, so get a little bit loose. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So you want to start up there?
Yeah, sure. So we'll hit you with your question, which is, what is your purpose?
Okay. I don't know what my purpose is. Um, I used to think that it was to save the world, right? Like in my more naive and testosterone filled youth. That was what, I don't know. I just wanted some epic death and, go down in history as like a myth, right?
Mhm.
So as I've grown older and hopefully wiser, my understanding of what that means has changed a lot. And I don't think that, not only do I not think that the world can be saved, I don't think the world is meant to be saved. I think that the world is what the world is. I do believe that God is the totality of experience and reality, and we are embedded in the mind of God, or in God itself. We are the body of it. But I believe that God is unitary, unified, and eternal, right? So if I take the idea that God is ubiquitous and omnipotent and omnipowerful, then that doesn't really leave any space for there to be something that's outside of God, right? So I take that to be real. Like, God is one thing, and everything is inside of it,
Mhm.
or him, or whatever God is. And I do believe that there are like lesser gods within that. Like I don't, as a Christian, I don't discount the reality of Shiva,
Mhm.
or of Muhammad, or Muhammad was a prophet. Let's choose another god.
Cupid.
Let's use Kali. That's been a theme throughout the day.
Mhm.
So I don't discount the reality of lesser gods, or the myths, or any of that. Like, I believe those things are real in some way. And I also simultaneously believe that the Bible is literal and symbolic. I believe it's like a book of wisdom and hypocrisy, all at the same time.
Mhm.
I have no way to demonstrate that what transpired in the Bible is playing out in this timeline. I don't know if it's a relic of some other dimension that we crossed, but I do know that I've smoked DMT and the roof ripped off my house, and I looked into heaven, and that was like right there. It was, one dimension over. And it was utterly convincing, more convincing than this table that I'm sitting at now, right? So it's not dissonance. It's like more of an all at onceness. I think that the earth is a nexus of many, many different dimensions kind of concressing or concurrent in this moment. So all kinds of things can happen at once. There can be shape-shifting reptilians, and it can be totally milquetoast, old Billy on his porch with a shotgun at the same time, at the same time that Jesus Christ is the Savior, at the same time that, there are 100 billion galaxies and life on a billion of the planets. I think that all of these things are happening at the same time, and that's okay. It's a paradox. It's a mystery. So as I've grown and changed and become more capable of keeping a variety of ideas in my mind at the same time, I've come to the conclusion that not only can the world not be saved, but there's no point in saving the world, right? The world is as it is. So we come here, time and existence and experience is something that God does. He creates, right? Time is something that God does. It's an extension of eternity, and a condensation of that. And we exist in those tentacles, those veins that reach out into the abyss. And it is what it is. Like, it is an experience. And because God's Spirit is running through all of these things, there are the heights of happiness and the depths of despair. And you can fluctuate between those states. You can experience ecstasy, which is those things at the same time. You can live in poverty all your life and be completely content. You can be the richest man on the planet and always believe that you need more. There are infinite ways to view the world and infinite perspectives to see it from as time plays out. There's no shortage or limit on what you can do on this planet. And if there is, then you move on to another planet, or you take a mushroom or whatever. So the variety of experience that's available on the planet is the point of the planet. And so I think that my purpose is to learn to be completely myself, to experience life as authentically as I can possibly experience it, with the scope of what I'm capable of doing and the limitations that are kind of on my shoulders. So I'm extraordinarily patient with my artwork and not as patient with my daughter, right? So I need to learn how to continue to be patient with my artwork and show my daughter more patience. I'm completely present when I'm creating my artwork, and not as present when I'm with my wife at the dinner table. And so I need to learn how to be as present with my wife at the dinner table as I am while I'm creating. So the the purpose of my life is to master who I am, I guess. And I guess after that you start teaching or something. I don't know what I don't know what the pay grade above it offers, but I think that is my purpose, is to be fully myself. And despite the pull of entropy and the awareness of death at the end of it, to live as though I am real, as though I actually exist, as though this moment is really happening and it has actual value. In that process, learning that it doesn't have to be a certain way or look a certain way. Half of the world can think I'm an asshole at the same time that half of the world can enjoy having me around. And both of those things are true, and both of those things are okay. I have my own opinions and tastes and perspectives on a whole variety of things. So the way that things play out is just the way that things play out. It doesn't mean that you're not in control or you can't help things to play out in a certain way. You have a lot of influence over the moment, but the only thing you truly control is how you're responding and dealing with your experience. And so navigating that process, I think, is maybe one of the highest goods that I have identified. Remaining authentic. If I feel angry, then experiencing anger. If I feel happiness, then fully leaning into that happiness, and not restricting myself by some type of predetermined or programmed response. So authenticity, I think, if I can maximize my authenticity gauge, regardless of if anybody else feels that I'm that way, if I can maximize my authenticity gauge, that's between me and God. I have to go inside to do that. If I can do that, then I will have achieved mastery over the self for at least a moment. Maybe that authenticity gauge depletes, the same day or whatever. But if I can achieve that 100% authenticity, then I feel like I'm doing why I came to the earth. I feel like I'm doing the reason. I'm doing the thing. So I believe that is, I don't know how that provides value for the greater world, but I hope that it does. I think that it does. I think that if we each do that thing individually, that there's a resonance among the rest of the flock, so to speak, to where we're able to kind of aggregate that authenticity and become a force that can deal with what we have coming in the future, which obviously is unknown. But yeah. I believe that is a requirement. So yeah, that would be my answer, I think.
I'm gonna take a stab at summarizing, and it's gonna do a bad job because it's too simple. But I'm gonna shoot for authentic and vibrant in terms of like how you live your life. Like you want to be authentic, you want to be true to self, and you also want to showcase and show what you're feeling or the emotions that are going on within you to the world, basically. Not a muted life.
Yeah, well, not necessarily even showcasing them. I get what you're saying, though. But I felt kind of hung up on that particular term. I don't know if it's showcasing. I think it's experiencing it. So, like as men, we just naturally tend toward the stoic, right? We tend toward not showing what's happening inside. Like if we can remain blank through hardcore situation, then job well done.
Yeah.
I didn't flinch or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know that I necessarily feel driven to show all of the things, but I feel driven to experience them. And if I am motivated and inspired to act on that thing, then I want to be present enough to be able to follow through with that. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think experience is the better word. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was
awesome.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
It's weird going into these blind. I don't know how many you've done or if you've ever done something like this. It's interesting to go in blind, and dude, it was a great experience. I had a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, Dan, me too. I appreciate it very much. And it's a good work that you're doing. People need outlets and they need good conversation. You ask great questions. So nice.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great pleasure.
Yes. Same thing that I've been telling everybody is, I don't know, look forward for another one, hopefully in like 6 months to a year, check in, see how everything's going. I'd love to run it back and, see how everything's going and, see how you're living with purpose,
Yeah, definitely. Hey, feel free, like when you listen back through this, I don't know how you edit or whatever, but if you come across like fluff or unnecessary stuff, like feel free to cut it out. I don't care.
I just throw annotations in. I have I hire a guy from Italy, and I found him on Reddit, and he just does the annotations for me, and so he'll kind of chop it up, and I just I like going in raw, like personally.
Nice.
But I like throwing.
Gross.
On that note, thank you. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the time, the insight, and the art. Mainly.
For sure. For sure, Dan. Thank you. Likewise, man. I definitely appreciate your time, man. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
All right. See you.
What's up, guys? Thanks for watching episode 17. Appreciate it. Appreciate the time, as always. Big week coming up. I know that this probably isn't like the most watched portion of the show, but whatever. Little sleep for the guys who watch it all the way through. We are probably going to have on a guy who has 300K in card sales in the past year, and he's going to be showing off like a $40,000 Zion Williams card, which is what we're waiting on. And then on top of that, we're going to be having on another guy who, this is a possibility, who was a part of a Nifty drop last week. So that's super exciting. It's just Nifty seems to be a crazy space, and so to catch somebody would be awesome. And I appreciate everybody from Rarible and all the other different markets, but just definitely something there. So that is coming. And then maybe also my buddy who runs this thing called On Camera Combatives, that's gonna dox him a little bit, but whatever. Knew him from college. He is an absolute monster when it comes to martial arts and just an absolute badass. So hopefully that comes to fruition, and probably, let me see, another artist on top of that coming on Saturday. So we are pumping them out. Hope you guys enjoy. I know this is a little long and rambly, but hope you guys liked it. As always, feedback much appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe. If you guys can, please share. Appreciate it. Peace.